In the silent void of space, where distant stars glittered like a field of frozen fireflies, the phantom planet loomed. It was a shadow against the stars, orbiting in the darkness, wrapped in the velvet of the universe's endless night. This colossal celestial body, untouched and unseen, moved with a grace that belied its sudden, impossible appearance. On Earth, telescopes swiveled with excited urgency, and scientists murmured, their voices hushed with bewilderment. The planet should not have been there. According to every known law of astronomy, its presence defied logic. Its orbit was erratic, its size colossal, and its very existence an unsolvable riddle, whispered in the hushed corridors of observatories and the tightly sealed offices of government agencies. Data streamed in, confounding every known model, solidifying the unsettling truth. Something profound and inexplicable had arrived in humanity's cosmic backyard. The scientific community grappled with a phenomenon that shattered their understanding of the cosmos. The surface of the phantom planet, observed through the most powerful lenses humanity had ever crafted, was a mosaic of darkness and light. Vast oceans of what appeared to be liquid, darker than the deepest trenches on Earth, contrasted sharply with land masses that shone with an unsettling internal glow. Thick, swirling clouds, dense and opaque, occasionally parted to reveal fleeting glimpses of the strange world below, hinting at an environment both alien and mesmerizing. And then there were the signals, faint, almost imperceptible. They danced through the vacuum of space, reaching Earth's receivers with a rhythmic regularity that strongly hinted at intention, a pattern too precise to be mere cosmic noise. The scientific community was irrevocably divided. Were these signals natural phenomena, an intricate cosmic ballet of unheard-of energies, or something more profound, something alive, something intelligent? This haunting and unexplained presence drew the eyes of the entire world, sparking intense debates in global scientific conferences and hushed government briefing rooms. Nations argued over the implications, the potential dangers, and the unprecedented opportunity. Behind closed doors, with the weight of humanity's future pressing upon them, plans for a mission, covert and unprecedented in its scale and ambition, began to meticulously take shape. The goal was simple, yet monumental: to explore, to understand, to unveil the secrets of the phantom planet. However, there were others watching, with interests far removed from purely scientific curiosity. A powerful private corporation, its intentions shrouded in a veil of impenetrable secrecy, abruptly stepped forward. Possessing vast resources and an audacious ambition, they declared their intent to reach the phantom planet first. This move, unexpected and disruptive, immediately raised questions about their true motives. With unparalleled efficiency, they assembled a specialized team, a formidable blend of military and scientific expertise, carefully selected for their skills and discretion. While the world watched, this secretive entity positioned itself at the forefront of humanity's most daring endeavor, hinting at a hidden agenda that stretched far beyond mere exploration or the acquisition of knowledge. The control room of the spacecraft was faintly lit, its only source of illumination emanating from the holographic display at its center. This ethereal glow cast a subtle sheen on the faces of those gathered, a silent testament to the monumental undertaking ahead. Captain Richard Foster, a man whose features were carved from years of service and silent burdens, stood with his arms crossed, his gaze fixed on the rotating image of the phantom planet. It orbited slowly, a sphere of mysteries and unknowns, a challenge to the very nature of their mission. Behind him, his crew, a meticulously chosen assembly of the most talented and skilled, stood in a semicircle, their expressions ranging from awestruck amazement to profound unease. Scientists in their crisp lab coats mingled with soldiers in their stoic uniforms, a diverse blend united by an uncharted destiny. "We land at dawn," Foster announced, his voice a steady thrum that cut through the quiet room. His eyes never left the hologram, as if he could uncover its secrets through sheer willpower alone. A murmur rippled through the crew, a collective intake of breath. Dr. Natalie, the mission's lead anthropologist, adjusted her glasses, her eyes reflecting a keen intellect and a hint of the excitement that bubbled beneath her composed exterior. Beside her, Sergeant Rios, a man whose military career was etched in the lines of his face, nodded silently, his hand instinctively resting on the sidearm at his belt. The rest of the team, biologists, geologists, and a handful of other military personnel, exchanged looks. Some faces were etched with the thrill of the unknown, others with a palpable tinge of fear at what they might find. They were venturing into truly uncharted territory, both literally and figuratively. Foster turned to face them, his presence commanding the room. "I know this is beyond anything we've trained for, but remember, we're here to explore, to discover, and to return safely. We're representing our planet and humanity itself. Let's show the universe what we're made of." His words seemed to settle some of the nerves in the room, a steadying anchor in the rising tide of apprehension. Dr. Natalie stepped forward, her voice clear and confident. "We've prepared for every possible scenario we can think of, but it's the unknowns that make this exciting. We're about to write history," Sergeant Rios added, his voice gruff but reassuring. "And we're here to make sure everyone writes that history and comes back to tell it. Stay sharp, stay smart." Foster gave a final nod. "Get some rest. We have a big day ahead of us." Dismissed. As the team dispersed, heading towards their respective quarters, Foster lingered, his eyes returning to the hologram of the phantom planet. It was more than just a mission for him. It was a calling, a chance to stand face to face with the unknown. The descent to the phantom planet was anything but smooth. The spacecraft, buffeted violently by atmospheric anomalies, groaned under the immense stress as it pierced the alien sky. Inside, Captain Foster and his crew were jostled, their faces tense, braced against the unpredictable forces. The view from the windows was a blur of swirling, opaque clouds and tantalizing, fleeting glimpses of the rugged landscape below. The planet seemed to resist their very presence, a hostile environment from its atmospheric edge inward, hinting at the challenges that awaited them on its surface. With a final, shuddering heave that reverberated through the entire vessel, the craft touched down on the surface. The impact was jarring, yet solid. A profound silence descended upon the crew, punctuated only by the distant, whisper-like sounds of alien winds. They had arrived. It was a world untouched, its secrets veiled in the ethereal, unfamiliar breeze that now stirred the dust around their landing zone. The journey, fraught with peril and anticipation, had concluded, but the true mystery of the phantom planet had only just begun to unfold. The phantom planet, a world of impossible contradictions, continued to unfold its mysteries. From the shadowed edges of a dense, alien forest, where flora twisted in forms unknown to earthly botany, figures began to emerge. They were startlingly human-like in their bipedal grace, yet undeniably distinct, their forms subtly elongated, their movements fluid and silent. Their skin, visible beneath simple, woven garments crafted from the planet's unique vegetation, was an earthen hue, reminiscent of rich, fertile soil. Their eyes, wide and bright, held a captivating blend of caution and profound curiosity, reflecting the strange, unfamiliar light of this distant sun. A collective breath seemed to catch in the throats of the human crew, a moment of profound wonder mixed with a primal, cautious anticipation. This was the true marvel of their journey. Life, vibrant and intelligent, on a world that should not exist. The clearing between the landed spacecraft and the burgeoning alien forest hummed with an almost unbearable tension. Every eye, both human and native, was fixed on Dr. Natalie, the mission's lead anthropologist. Her heart, a frantic drum against her ribs, pulsed with a mix of professional exhilaration and a profound personal fear. She stepped forward, her movements slow and deliberate, a testament to her training. Her hands, empty and open, rose slowly, palms outward, a universal gesture of peace, a fragile bridge cast across the void between two vastly different worlds. The natives, their forms still partially obscured by the shadows of their forest, watched her intently, their bright eyes unblinking, their silence profound. The precariousness of this moment, the high stakes of this first contact, hung heavy in the alien air. Natalie continued her careful overtures, her voice unheard, her message conveyed through a language older than any spoken word. She pointed to herself, then gestured towards them, a wordless question of identity. Then, kneeling slowly on the alien soil, she placed a hand over her heart, a symbol of self, before extending it, open and vulnerable, towards the waiting natives. To the astonishment and profound relief of the watching crew, one native, bolder than the rest, stepped forward. His movements mirrored Natalie's own cautious yet curious approach. He mimicked her gesture, placing a hand on his own chest, then slowly reached out, his fingers hesitating just inches from her extended palm. A suspended moment hung between them, charged with the magnitude of this interstellar encounter. Then, gently, tentatively, the native touched Natalie's hand. His expression, as alien as his world, softened into one of wonder and cautious acceptance. A collective murmur of astonishment and relief rippled through the human crew. A simple, yet profound gesture had built a bridge across the stars. As that initial contact unfolded, the rest of the native population slowly emerged from the dense shadows of their forest. Their earlier expressions of weariness and apprehension subtly shifted, replaced by a growing interest and an almost childlike curiosity. Following Natalie's courageous lead, other crew members cautiously began to interact. Each shared gesture, each tentative exchange of observation and mimicry, began to weave the first delicate threads of understanding between these two vastly different worlds. Small groups formed, sharing simple objects, sketching crude symbols in the dirt, the initial fear slowly giving way to a cautious, yet undeniable hope. The clearing, once a place of tense standoff, now buzzed with the nascent energy of interspecies cultural exchange, laying the groundwork for a fragile, promising alliance. Yet, even as the first threads of understanding were woven between humanity and the phantom planet's inhabitants, an underlying tension clung to the human camp like a dense, unsettling fog. The hum of machinery, the occasional crackle of communication devices, could not entirely mask it. Captain Richard Foster, his mind a whirlpool of lingering doubts and suspicions, navigated through the bustling activity with a purposeful, almost grim stride. The peaceful first contact, while a scientific triumph, had done little to quell the unease that gnawed at him regarding the true nature of their mission. His destination was the temporary structure that served as the expedition's command center, where Mr. Gray, the representative of the corporation funding their audacious journey, had established his office. Mr. Gray, whose polished appearance and smooth demeanor always seemed starkly out of place amidst the rugged alien surroundings, looked up as Captain Foster entered. His smile was practiced, a superficial gesture of cordiality, but his eyes, cold and calculating, betrayed an entirely different, far more guarded intent. "Captain Foster," Gray began, his voice a careful blend of politeness and subtle condescension, "to what do I owe this visit?" Foster, however, was in no mood for pleasantries. He didn't mince words, his gaze unwavering, cutting through Gray's facade. "Why are we really here, Gray?" he demanded, his voice low but laced with an unmistakable edge. "There's something you're not telling us. This isn't just a scientific expedition, is it?" The tension in the small, temporary office immediately spiked, a clear clash of wills and hidden agendas. Mr. Gray's practiced smile faltered, a fleeting crack in his polished facade. He insisted, his voice a careful blend of cordiality and condescension, that the corporation's purpose was purely for the acquisition of knowledge. He described the Phantom Planet as nothing less than a scientific gold mine, a trove of untold data waiting to be unearthed. Yet Captain Foster remained unconvinced. Years of service had honed his instincts, allowing him to recognize evasion in the most carefully chosen words. He had seen enough in the shadows of corporate dealings to understand that such grand pronouncements often concealed far darker intentions. The air in the temporary office thickened with unspoken accusations, a silent standoff between the mission's stated ideals and a growing, unsettling suspicion. For a moment, the tension between them was a palpable force, thick and unyielding. Then Foster's voice, though low, carried an undeniable edge of warning. "I'm keeping my eyes open," he stated, his gaze unwavering. "If there's any hint that this mission is putting my crew or the natives at risk for reasons other than what's been stated, I will take action." Gray nodded, his smile returning, a smooth, unsettling mask that didn't quite reach his cold, calculating eyes. "Of course, Captain," he responded, a careful blend of deference and insincerity in his tone. "We all want what's best for the mission." Foster turned, his departure leaving a lingering sense of foreboding in the confined space, a silent promise of deeper conflict should Gray's unspoken agenda surface. As the alien day waned, casting long, unfamiliar shadows across the rugged landscape, a small team ventured deeper into the phantom planet's expanse. Dr. Natalie, accompanied by a handful of scientists and guarded by 2 soldiers, followed their native guides. The destination was a place of ancient power, a hidden cave nestled among twisted rock formations, a sight whispered to be of both reverence and fear. The guides moved with a solemn gravity, their quiet demeanor underscoring the significance of their journey. The cave mouth, a dark maw in the alien rock, seemed to beckon, promising secrets from a world untouched by human history. Inside the cavern, the beams from their lights pierced the oppressive darkness, slowly revealing walls etched with primitive yet intricate carvings. These were not mere doodles, they were a visual history, a story millennia in the making. Dr. Natalie moved from one panel to another, her light tracing the lines of figures depicting the native people's way of life, their struggles against the harsh alien environment, their triumphs in the face of adversity, the simple rhythms of their existence. "These carvings," she murmured, her voice echoing softly in the vast space. "They're incredible. They depict their way of life, their struggles, their triumphs." The initial sense was one of profound historical wonder, a glimpse into an ancient alien culture. Yet, as the expedition ventured deeper into the cave's winding passages, the tone of the carvings underwent a stark and unsettling transformation. The images grew darker, more ominous, shedding their initial innocence for a profound sense of dread. Scenes of daily life gave way to terrifying depictions of fear and chaos. Figures were shown cowering, their forms distorted by terror under a great shadow, a pervasive darkness that seemed to consume the light around it. Dr. Natalie felt a chill, a primal unease, as she studied the unsettling imagery. The mystery of the planet was shifting, turning sinister, hinting at something far more malevolent than mere environmental hardship. "They speak of a darkness," Natalie said, her voice tinged with unease, "an entity or force that brought terror to their world." Captain Foster, who had insisted on accompanying the expedition, leaned in, his gaze fixed on the unsettling images. A coldness seeped into his bones as he imagined the fear these ancient people must have faced. He recognized the raw, universal terror depicted, vivid even after countless generations. This discovery added a new, perilous layer to their mission. "We need to document all of this," Foster decided, his voice firm. "Take pictures, make notes. We might need to consult with experts back home to decipher the full meaning." As the team worked, the natives' fear, immortalized in stone, felt like a foreboding warning of an unknown danger that now directly threatened them. The night on the phantom planet fell like an oppressive cloak, deep and impenetrable. It transformed the alien landscape into a realm of shadows and whispers, where the strange flora seemed to writhe and the distant, unfamiliar stars offered little comfort. The camp, a small, fragile island of light and life in the midst of this vast wilderness, seemed more vulnerable than ever under the star-studded sky. It was during the first watch, when the stillness of the night was at its peak, that the tranquility was violently shattered. A sudden, ear-piercing scream tore through the camp, raw and full of terror, instantly followed by a chaos of shouts and the desperate scrambling of the crew. The fragile peace was gone, replaced by sudden, disorienting horror. Captain Richard Foster, jolted awake, grabbed his jacket and rushed out of his tent. The camp was in complete disarray, the air dense with fear and confusion, as soldiers and scientists alike scrambled for lights and weapons, struggling to comprehend the situation. Then, through the flickering light of emergency lamps, he saw them. 3 bodies lying near the perimeter of the camp, twisted and broken in ways that defied recognition. Dr. Natalie, her face pale and eyes wide with horror, stood by them, a hand clamped over her mouth. "What happened?" Foster demanded, his voice cutting through the turmoil. Sergeant Rios, his rifle held tightly, replied, "We don't know, Captain. They were on watch. We heard screams, and by the time we got here, it was like this." Foster knelt beside the nearest body. The injuries were severe, the marks on the flesh unrecognizable. "Not an animal," he murmured. "Not a weapon." It was as if they had been torn apart by an unseen force, a chilling echo of the ominous carvings in the ancient cave. The rest of the team gathered, their faces a canvas of shock and fear. "What the hell is out there?" one soldier whispered, his voice barely audible over the murmur of the alien wind. The morning after the attack, the atmosphere in the camp was somber, heavy with grief and an unspoken dread. Captain Richard Foster, with the night's horrors still vivid in his mind, made his way to the command center where Mr. Gray, the corporate representative, had secluded himself. The moment Foster entered, he could sense Gray's unease. The usually immaculate man looked disheveled, his eyes darting nervously, his composure fractured. Foster's entrance seemed to both startle and alarm him. "We need to talk, Gray," Foster said, his voice low but tinged with a barely contained fury. Gray attempted a smile, but it faltered, revealing his profound anxiety. "Captain Foster, what can I do for you?" he asked, his voice strained. "You can start by telling me the truth," Foster retorted, stepping closer, his gaze unwavering. "Last night, 3 of my people died, and I have a feeling you know more about what's out here than you've let on." Gray hesitated, his eyes shifting away, but Foster's intense stare compelled him to speak. "All right," Gray conceded, his voice barely above a whisper. The corporation had suspicions. Anomalies in the data. Hints of something more than just a new planet. They thought it might be an entity of some kind. Foster's fists clenched at his sides. "An entity? And you didn't think to warn us?" Gray exclaimed defensively. "It was theoretical, Captain." "We had no concrete evidence, just speculations." "But yes, they thought it could be something powerful. Something that could be harnessed." "For what?" Foster's voice rose, full of anger and disbelief. Gray finally admitted, his voice barely audible. "For weapons. They thought if it could be captured, studied, it could be a significant advantage." Foster's anger boiled over. They were not explorers, but bait, sent under false pretenses to encounter an unknown, potentially lethal entity. "You put my crew in danger! You put this entire mission in jeopardy for weapons!" Gray looked away, unable to meet Foster's furious gaze. "It was above my pay grade, Captain. I was just following orders." Foster took a moment to compose himself, his mind racing. This revelation changed everything. The mission, their purpose on this planet, their very lives, were now in the balance. "I need to inform my crew," Foster said, his voice icy. "And we need to figure out what our next steps are, now that we know what we're dealing with." Captain Richard Foster knew they needed a new strategy. Their survival, and possibly that of the natives, depended on it. With Dr. Natalie by his side, he approached the native settlement. The natives greeted them with caution. The events of the previous night had not gone unnoticed. Foster and Natalie came not as explorers now, but as seekers of aid in a struggle against a shared enemy. The grim reality of their situation demanded a radical shift in approach. The corporate betrayal had laid bare the true nature of the threat, and the humans, technology alone was clearly insufficient. Hope, however fragile, now lay in the ancient wisdom of the planet's indigenous people. In the native settlement, a stark shift in atmosphere occurred. No longer was the air thick with cautious curiosity, but with a palpable sense of shared dread and dawning hope. Captain Foster, with Dr. Natalie by his side, communicated the crew's plight through a combination of desperate gestures and rudimentary drawings etched into the alien soil. The story of the phantom entity, of the recent attack and the devastating loss, was conveyed with urgent clarity. The natives, their earthen-hued faces somber, listened with an unnerving understanding. Their expressions transitioned from quiet contemplation to a resolute determination, revealing a history far older and more intimate with this unseen terror. The native leader, a figure of quiet strength and ancient wisdom, rose and swept his hand first towards the star-dappled sky, then towards the ground, weaving a silent tale of shadows and survival that resonated deeply within the human crew. The meeting in the native settlement transformed into an urgent council of war. Dr. Natalie, her anthropological insights proving invaluable, translated the native leader's words. They have faced this entity before. It is a part of their history, a threat they have learned to live with and to fight. Hope, fragile yet potent, sparked in Foster's chest. The natives demonstrated their ancient methods, holding aloft a torch whose light, they claimed, temporarily repelled the entity. They pointed to certain reinforced hollows, natural shelters that the darkness could not, or would not, penetrate. Foster absorbed every detail, his mind racing to integrate this alien wisdom with human technology. Plans were drawn in the dirt, a fusion of two disparate cultures uniting against a common, terrifying foe. The alliance, born of desperate necessity, began to solidify, threads of mutual respect weaving through the fear. The camp pulsed with activity, a hive of meticulous preparation for the impending confrontation. Crew and natives, now united by a common looming threat, worked with a shared fervor. Captain Foster moved among them, a silent sentinel offering guidance and assistance. The natives, their knowledge of the entity proving invaluable, directed the placement of traps around the perimeter. Not the conventional snares for animals, but intricate constructions of light and sound, designed to deter the formless darkness. Soldiers, under the grim command of Sergeant Rios, modified their weapons, attaching powerful lights and sonic devices, transforming them into tools of sensory overload. Scientists, including Dr. Natalie, lent their technical expertise, ensuring the effectiveness of these hastily adapted defenses. As dusk began to paint the alien sky, the defensive structures of the camp took shape. Around the perimeter, a network of traps glowed faintly. Emitting low, rhythmic hums, the natives, blend of ancient lore and human engineering. The soldiers, rifles, once purely kinetic, now sported powerful strobing lights and noise-making devices, designed not to destroy but to repel. In one corner of the camp, a larger shelter was being reinforced, a sanctuary born of native design, but constructed with materials salvaged from the spacecraft and fortified with local flora. It stood as a last resort, a haven should the entity breach their outer defenses. The glowing tips of native spears, coated in a phosphorescent substance, added an eerie, ethereal readiness to the scene, a testament to the ingenuity born of centuries of struggle. As twilight deepened, casting long, unsettling shadows across the landscape, a final meeting was convened in the center of the camp. Captain Foster, the native leader, and key members of both groups gathered, their faces etched with solemn determination. The strategy was simple, yet fraught with peril. Use concentrated light and sound to repel the entity, and, if overwhelmed, fall back to the reinforced shelter. Above all, the message was clear: stay together, a united front. Foster addressed the assembled group, his voice steady and reassuring despite the palpable tension. "Tonight," he declared, his gaze sweeping over the faces, human and alien alike, "we stand together against a common foe. We've prepared the best we can. Remember, stay alert, stay close, and watch each other's backs." Nods of agreement, grim and resolute, were exchanged, solidifying a fragile camaraderie born of shared danger. Darkness, deep and impenetrable, fell like a cloak upon the phantom planet, blanketing the camp in an oppressive shroud. Foster took his position, a silent sentinel, his modified weapon clutched tightly. Around him the crew and natives stood ready, their eyes, both human and alien, scanning the vast, inky blackness that pressed in from every direction. Every rustle of alien foliage, every whisper of the strange winds set nerves on edge. The air hung heavy with apprehension, a tense vigil under the unfamiliar stars. They waited, unified and vigilant, for the entity that lurked in the shadows, for the inevitable moment when the quiet before the storm would finally break. The night on the phantom planet had been a tense vigil, every rustle of alien flora, every distant sigh of wind a whisper of impending danger. Yet, it was not in the dead of night, but in the nascent gray light of dawn, as the first hints of the alien sun touched the horizon, that the entity made its presence known. Without warning, the air around the camp turned frigid, a sudden unnatural cold that seeped into bones and heralded a profound sense of dread. Then, from the deepest shadows, as if woven from the very fabric of the encroaching darkness, the entity materialized. It was a swirling mass of abyssal shadow, formless yet sentient, an absence of light that seemed to absorb the nascent dawn around it. The camp, an island of life momentarily caught in its gaze, erupted into chaos. Alarms blared. Emergency lights flashed in desperate defiance, and the sharp crackle of weapons fire filled the frigid air. Captain Richard Foster, seizing his modified weapon, a rifle augmented with powerful lights and a sonic device, plunged into the fray. Beside him, a native warrior, face etched with grim determination, brandished a spear whose tip glowed with an eerie, phosphorescent light. Foster unleashed bursts of blinding light and disorienting sound, while the warrior lunged and thrust with practiced precision. The entity recoiled, its shadowy form shuddering under the assault, yet it was relentlessly. It moved with terrifying agility, lashing out with tendrils of darkness that sought to ensnare and crush. The camp's meticulously placed defenses, the light traps, the sonic barriers, slowed its advance, but could not halt it entirely. Sergeant Rios and his soldiers laid down covering fire, their weapons spitting controlled bursts, while Dr. Natalie and her team worked feverishly to maintain the generators powering the defensive lights. The natives fought with a fierce, ancient bravery, their intimate knowledge of the entity guiding their every desperate strike. Yet, despite their combined efforts, the entity seemed to feed off the conflict, growing more aggressive with each desperate repulse. As the alien sun began to climb higher, its strange light casting an unfamiliar glow across the battle-scarred camp, the entity's form began to flicker, its edges wavering as if daylight were an anathema to its shadowy essence. Seizing this momentary weakness, Foster rallied the combined forces. "Push it back!" he bellowed, his voice cutting through the din of battle. "Use the light! Together!" A brief surge of hope coursed through the desperate defenders, prompting a renewed, unified advance. But just as the entity seemed on the verge of retreat, a new, unforeseen turmoil erupted. Mr. Gray, the corporate representative, emerged from the relative safety of the command center. He clutched a device, clearly of advanced design, and far beyond any standard equipment issued to the crew, its purpose unknown. Gray's eyes were wide, a startling mix of fear and excitement, as he moved towards the edge of the camp where the entity's lingering shadow still clung. "Gray, what are you doing?" Foster shouted, a surge of apprehension overriding the exhaustion of battle. Gray did not respond, his entire focus consumed by the device in his hands and the retreating darkness. With a single decisive push of a button, Gray activated the device. It emitted a piercing light and a deep, droning sound that vibrated through the very ground. For a suspended moment, nothing happened. Then, the air seemed to ripple, and the entity, which had been retreating into the forest, paused. Its formless mass undulated, drawn back towards the camp by the device in Gray's hands. "Gray, stop!" Foster yelled, rushing towards him, but it was too late. The entity reacted to the device, but not in the way Gray had anticipated. Instead of being captured or repelled, it was enraged. With a sudden, violent surge, the entity lashed out, a wave of palpable darkness rolling towards Gray. The corporate man's eyes widened in terror as the horrific realization of his mistake dawned. There was no time for regret. In an instant, the entity engulfed him, the device's light snuffed out as if it had never been. Gray's screams were short-lived, consumed by the entity's wrath. The darkness receded as quickly as it had attacked, retreating back into the forest, leaving behind a stunned, chilling silence. Foster reached the spot where Gray had stood just moments before, his mind reeling. The device, now a twisted wreck, lay on the ground, its purpose, whatever it had truly been, unfulfilled and tragically turned to catastrophe. The crew and natives, shaken and exhausted, gathered around, their expressions a canvas of shock and fear. The reality of what they had just witnessed settled heavily upon them. Gray's actions, and the very existence of his hidden device, raised new, terrifying questions. Their understanding of the entity was woefully inadequate. "We can't kill it!" A soldier cried out, his voice etched with fear and exhaustion, echoing the sentiment that was slowly dawning on everyone. Their weapons, their strategies, everything they had planned and executed, had only provoked and angered the entity, not weakened it. The mission was teetering on the edge of disaster. The entity was a force that could not be controlled or contained by human means. The immediate threat of the entity receded into the shadows, but a heavy air of desperation hung over the camp. Captain Richard Foster, standing amidst the huddle of weary faces, felt the weight of command heavier than ever. Gray's treachery and subsequent demise had thrown a wrench into an already complex situation. "We need a new plan," Foster finally said, his voice cutting through the chaos of despair. "What we faced is beyond our current understanding. It's not just an animal, it's part of this planet, a force we haven't encountered before." Dr. Natalie stepped forward, her face drawn but her eyes alight with a determined spark. "We need to study it, not fight it. There must be a way to coexist, to avoid provoking it. The natives have survived here with this entity. We need to learn from them." The native leader, who had been quietly observing, gestured to Foster and Natalie, then swept his hand towards the forest. His message was clear. They had to understand the entity, its patterns, its territory. It was during this somber assembly that the native leader, a figure who had commanded respect and admiration, stepped forward. Through the combined efforts of Dr. Natalie and a native interpreter, his proposal was conveyed, a plan that chilled the air and stilled the hearts of those who heard it. The leader proposed to lure the entity away from the camp, deep into the uncharted territories of the planet. The assembly in the camp was hushed, a somber quiet, broken only by the alien wind. Captain Richard Foster stood before the native leader, his face strained, the weight of the situation pressing down. "We can't allow you to do this," he argued vehemently, his voice raw with disbelief. "It's too risky, a likely suicide mission. There has to be another way." The native leader, his eyes reflecting a depth of ancient resolve and an unspoken understanding of the stakes, shook his head slowly. Through the native interpreter, his response resonated with a profound sense of duty and sacrifice. "This entity has been a part of our world for generations. We have lived in its shadow, understanding its ways. I know this risk, but it is our way to protect our home, our people. You are now part of this world, part of this struggle. My decision is made." A heavy silence fell over the assembly. The crew, many of whom had formed bonds of respect and even friendship with the natives, looked on with a mix of admiration and despair. The decision, while heartbreaking, carried with it the undeniable weight of leadership and the burden of responsibility. Dr. Natalie, her voice barely a whisper, translated the leader's final words before he departed. "Tell them this is not just for us or for them. It is for the future, for the possibility of peace with this world. Remember us." With those words, the leader turned. Accompanied by a small contingent of his most trusted warriors, he ventured into the deepening twilight of the alien world. Foster, his crew, and the remaining natives watched them disappear into the vast, unforgiving landscape, a profound sense of loss mingling with deep respect for the sacrifice made in the hope of a greater good. Under a sky darkened by the approach of night and the sense of impending doom, the native leader and his small band of warriors set their plan into motion. They moved with deliberate intent, a series of calculated provocations designed to draw the entity's attention. The rhythmic beating of drums, the insistent clanging of their weapons against the alien rock, echoed across the twilight landscape, a challenge to the darkness that had haunted their world for generations. From a distance, Captain Richard Foster, Dr. Natalie, and the remaining crew members watched, their hearts heavy. The entity, sensing the deliberate provocation, emerged from the shadows of the forest, like a tide of malevolent darkness, its form shifting and roiling. As the entity surged forward, the native leader and his warriors did not falter. They ran, leading the monstrous force away from the camp, away from the potential victims of its wrath. Their movements were swift and purposeful, a desperate dance with death itself under the alien stars. Understanding that this was the moment to act, Captain Foster signaled his crew. "Now to the ship!" he ordered, his voice a blend of urgency and sorrow. The crew, carrying the wounded and aiding each other, hurried towards their spacecraft. As they retreated, Foster couldn't help but look back. He saw the native leader, a solitary figure against the vastness of the planet, swallowed by the surging darkness. Yet in that moment, his sacrifice blazed brighter than any light on that forsaken world. The crew reached the spacecraft, the sense of profound loss mingling with the primal instinct for survival. The engines roared to life, vibrations coursing through the vessel as it prepared to ascend. Foster took one last look at the phantom planet, the world that had been a mystery, an adventure, and now a grave for heroes. As the spacecraft lifted off, breaking free from the planet's tenacious hold, the entity, now a distant shadow, ceased its pursuit, its purpose fulfilled in the sacrifice it had demanded. In the profound silence of the spacecraft, as it ascended into the inky void, each crew member processed the harrowing events in their own way. Some wept quietly, the weight of their losses too heavy to bear silently. Others sat in stunned, reflective silence, their gazes lost in the receding blue-green orb of the phantom planet. A few whispered prayers, or perhaps words of thanks for their impossible survival. Captain Richard Foster remained at the viewport, his eyes fixed on the distant world. The image of the native leader's final brave stand was seared into his memory. The phantom planet had exacted a heavy price, a cost measured in lives and trauma, yet in the selfless courage of its indigenous people, it had also revealed the profound depths of selflessness that beings, regardless of their world, were capable of. Dr. Natalie, her face a portrait of grief and exhaustion, joined Foster. Her voice was soft, barely a whisper against the hum of the engines. "We learned so much," she said, her eyes mirroring his. "But at such a cost." Months after the harrowing events on the phantom planet, as humanity still grappled with the fragmented tales and extensive data brought back by Captain Richard Foster and his crew, the scientific community was shaken by another groundbreaking discovery. A new planet, startlingly similar to the phantom planet, appeared in the solar system. This new world, quickly dubbed Eclipse Planet, due to its sudden emergence from the deep darkness of space, was a cosmic enigma that baffled astronomers and physicists alike. It manifested seemingly out of nowhere, just outside the orbit of Neptune. Its sudden presence and irregular, elliptical orbit defied every known law of celestial mechanics, suggesting an unnatural trajectory. Initial telescopic observations revealed a surface bearing a striking resemblance to that of the phantom planet, vast, dark oceans contrasting with unsettlingly luminescent land masses, all shrouded in swirling, opaque clouds. The scientific community buzzed with theories, ranging from rogue bodies captured by the sun's gravity to the manifestation of unknown cosmic phenomena, or even the chilling whispers of alien terraforming projects. The discovery of the Eclipse Planet prompted a flurry of activity within space agencies around the world. There was an immediate push to organize a new mission, driven by a complex mix of fear, insatiable curiosity, and the urgent need to understand the implications of these emergent worlds. Captain Foster, who had been debriefing with space agency officials and scientists since his return, found himself once again at the epicenter of this new cosmic development. His unique, harrowing experience on the phantom planet made him an invaluable asset, his insights crucial to understanding the potential risks and the profound mysteries surrounding this new, impossible world. Meanwhile, in the wider world, the appearance of the Eclipse Planet stirred a fusion of astonishment and profound concern. People looked up at the stars with a new sense of wonder, but also with an undeniable unease, pondering what other unfathomable secrets the universe might be hiding. The phantom planet had already altered humanity's perception of its place in the cosmos. The Eclipse Planet only deepened that existential shift, leaving a universe of unanswered questions.